The sun was barely up when Derek James unlocked the side entrance of the garage with his usual sigh, a habit formed more from weariness than routine. The streets of Montgomery still wore the silence of early morning, but Derek was already in his dark blue overalls, calloused hands carrying a steel thermos filled with instant coffee and memory. He was always the first one in, and usually the last to leave. Quiet, reliable, overlooked. To most, Derek was just a black guy in the back at Thompson's Auto, the small-town auto shop that had stood for decades as a greasy staple of old conservative Alabama. He didn't own the place. Mr. Rick Thompson did. A man who hadn't fixed a car in 20 years, but still found ways to remind Derek who was in charge. Still, Derek kept his head down. He wasn't there for Rick. He wasn't even there for himself anymore. After losing his wife Angelique to cancer 3 years ago and drowning in medical bills for nearly as long, the garage had become his sanctuary, the one place the noise of grief couldn't always catch him. The shop opened at 8 a.m., but Derek was already beneath a lifted Chevy before 7 o'clock. Grease marked his arms like tattoos of survival. As he cranked a stubborn bolt, a soft jingle of the customer bell echoed through the garage, way too early for anyone to be inside. He rolled out from under the car, surprised. Standing at the door was a small, elderly white woman, bent slightly forward from the weight of age and years gone by. Her rain-soaked trench coat clung to her frail frame, and in one hand, she held the side of a rusty old bicycle with a broken chain dragging on the ground behind her. She looked around nervously, eyes flicking over the dim garage. Then, locking eyes with Derek, she hesitated. For just a second. That second was heavy, full of something unspoken. A flicker of fear? Judgment? She clutched her handbag tighter against her chest. Derek saw it. He always saw it. He'd seen it when he'd tried to help white women load groceries into their cars, only to have them cross the street instead. He'd seen it in stolen glances from shop owners when he walked into stores. He'd seen it behind forced smiles, the kind that never quite reached the eyes. But this woman, she needed help. Slowly, Derek pulled off his gloves and stood tall, wiping his hands on an old rag. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, voice soft but steady. "You all right?" The woman looked embarrassed to even be there. "I'm so sorry to bother you this early. My bike it's got a problem. The chain came off a few blocks back. I tried to fix it myself, but..." She trailed off. Her voice trembled a little. Derek gently stepped forward and reached for the bike. "Let me take a look." As he crouched to examine the busted chain, a pair of customers, two white men drinking gas station coffee, stood at the front desk watching with raised eyebrows. One of them whispered to the other, "Guess anybody can walk in here now. Even for a bike?" Derek heard it, but he didn't react. "You don't do bikes, do you?" The woman asked, uneasy now, perhaps aware of the tension. "No, ma'am," Derek replied, tightening the nuts on the wheels. "But today I do." He didn't ask for her name or her politics, or who she had voted for in 1960. None of that mattered. He saw someone in need. Older, alone, tired, cold. It was enough. "This may take a few minutes," he said gently. She stood silently, watching him, and as the minutes passed, something in her posture softened. "You're very kind," she finally said. Derek gave her a hint of a smile. "My mama used to ride everywhere on a bike like this, even to church, miles and miles. Said it was the only time she felt truly free." He chuckled softly at the memory. The woman smiled too, lips trembling as a tear silently slipped down her cheek. "I haven't seen a man speak about his mom like that in many years," she whispered. 10 minutes later, the chain was repaired. The tires were topped off. He'd even wiped down the frame with an old cloth. The bicycle still looked ancient, but it moved now, like it had purpose again. She reached into her handbag, pulling out a few crumpled bills. "No charge," Derek said quickly, waving his hand. "Like I said, reminded me of my mama." "No," she insisted, pressing the money toward him. "You did more than just fix an old bicycle. Young man, you helped someone who didn't have any other options." Their eyes met. It was in that moment she saw him, really saw him. Not a black man in overalls, not a mechanic, not a second-class citizen, but a human being with generosity in his spirit. She reached out and gently pressed her hand on his grease-stained one. "You may never know how much you did for me today." And just like that, she rode away down the wet road, slowly but steadily, like the years were falling away from her. Derek stood at the garage door a moment longer, watching her disappear into the soft drizzle of the morning. He didn't know her name. She didn't know his story. But something in his chest warmed, if only for a moment. When he turned back inside, Rick, the manager, was watching from his office window. His arms were crossed. There was a tightness in his jaw. Derek didn't think much of it at the time. He just returned to work. But if he knew what would happen the next morning, how one simple act of kindness would shake the walls of his quiet, oppressed life, he might have looked a little longer down that road the woman rode away on. Because sometimes the road you send kindness down brings miracles back to your door. The next morning should have been like any other. Derek James arrived early, just like he always did, half an hour before anyone else, quietly unlocking the shop gates, flicking on the lights, and stepping into the familiar hum of motor oil and cracked concrete. It was a routine rooted in survival, not ambition. After years of being overlooked, misunderstood, and expected to do more with less simply because of the color of his skin, Derek had given up on chasing justice. He had settled for peace or something like it. But that morning, the air felt heavier. He couldn't quite place it, but something felt off. Maybe it was how quiet the shop was when he walked in. No usual murmuring from the office radio. No smell of fresh donuts, which Rick usually brought in to suck up to the few white customers who still remembered when his daddy ran the place. Derek brushed it off. He hung his hoodie, clocked in, and pulled out his favorite socket wrench. He walked his usual corner. Bay 4, the place he had turned into something more than just a workstation. It was a safe space, his altar, a place where he prayed silently through hard work, fixing broken engines like puzzles, refusing to let the world break him no matter how many times it tried. But no sooner had he opened his toolbox than he noticed something strange. The drawers were already pulled open. Some of his tools were missing. The few expensive ones he had bought with his own money weren't where he kept them. He frowned, checked again. Still gone. "Hey, Jordan," he called out to the junior mechanic walking by. "You take my torque wrench last night?" The young boy, maybe 22, fresh out of trade school, froze. His eyes darted toward the front office. "I think you better talk to Rick," he said under his breath, then kept walking, his face carefully emotionless. Just then, like a movie playing out in real time, Rick Thompson walked in from the front office, holding a yellow envelope like a sentence wrapped in paper. He didn't say good morning, didn't offer a handshake, just stood there with that same smirk of superiority, the kind that never fully disappeared, even when he pretended to be decent, the kind of smirk that too many people in Derek's life had worn when trying to remind him of his place. "We need to talk," Rick said coldly, nodding his head toward the back room. Derek wiped his hands, heart now pacing. He followed in silence, trying to stay calm, but something in his gut was beginning to twist. They stepped into the back office. Fluorescent lights buzzed loudly above them, too bright, too cold, like they'd been turned up just for the occasion. Rick didn't sit down. He tossed the envelope on the table and crossed his arms. "I got word from a couple customers. Said you were offering free services on company time." Derek stared at him. "Free services?" he asked. "Are you talking about that woman yesterday? She needed help. All I did was fix her bike. It didn't even take." Rick raised his hand to silence him. "You think that matters?" He stepped closer now, voice dropping a notch. "You think this is some charity garage? That you get to use my tools, my building, my name, so you can play hero? Some of the folks who saw that weren't exactly comfortable. You made the front of the shop look like a street corner handout." Derek blinked. His silence wasn't from fear. It was familiar disappointment, a heaviness in the soul that black men know too well, the kind that comes from being judged not by your action, but by your existence. "They were uncomfortable because I helped an old white woman?" Derek asked slowly. Rick's jaw worked slightly, then laughed under his breath. "You don't get it. You never have. Look, I'm letting you go. Been looking for an excuse for months. This just made it easy. Derek didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't beg. He looked down at the yellow envelope, the word termination printed in bold at the top, and he let it burn into his memory. I gave you 7 years, he said softly. Built your customer base. Worked Saturdays. Never stole a dime. And you fire me for helping someone. Rick shrugged. Be glad I didn't press charges. Technically, you were using equipment without authorization. There it was, the justification, the weaponization of policy, the legal excuse that white men have used for generations to hide their prejudice behind printed rules. Derek walked out without another word. His box of personal tools, what was left of them, had been stacked by the door like his pride in pieces. He carried it through the garage with every weight of injustice pressing against his back. No one spoke. Jordan wouldn't meet his eyes. A couple of the older workers nodded toward him silently, guilt behind their glance, but not enough courage to speak up. He didn't blame them. That's how places like this worked. You stayed quiet to survive. You blended in, especially if your skin wasn't white. Outside, the sky had turned charcoal, and rain began to weep down from the clouds, as if the heavens themselves were grieving what had just happened. Derek sat in his old beat-up pickup, the one with a cracked windshield and blessed sticker barely hanging on the back, and for a long moment he didn't move. His dignity had taken a hit. He had no words for, no strength for right now. The last $300 in his account wouldn't last a week. The rent was due, and every job opener would likely look at him and wonder, not what he can do, but what he represents. He looked down at his grease-covered hands that healed old engines, that repaired rusted bikes, that tried to be good in a world that often didn't care. The mechanic who did right and got buried for it. But even in the middle of that storm, somewhere deep inside him, a still small voice reminded him, kindness is never wasted. Even if the world doesn't reward you right away, somebody out there felt it. Somebody saw it. He didn't know it then, but someone did. And that someone was already on their way to put everything right. Not because he demanded it, but because the universe sometimes sends miracles wrapped in mercy, in return for quiet, unrecorded, unselfish kindness. And tomorrow morning, that miracle would arrive hidden behind the quiet knock of a stranger's hand. Derek sat on the edge of his creaky porch, hands clasped, his toolbox to the side, untouched since the day he'd walked out of the shop. The late Alabama sun draped the modest street in orange. There were children laughing 2 houses down, someone grilling, someone fighting across the way like clockwork, the kind of noisy life that reminded you, painfully, that the world kept spinning even when yours had come to a slow, heartbreaking still. 2 days had passed since he was fired. Fired, not laid off, not asked to take a break. Rick Thompson hadn't even bothered with a warning or a meeting, just a yellow envelope, a false accusation, and the quiet humiliation of knowing that being black and kind at the same time had cost him his job. Again, he hadn't told anyone, not his pastor at Mount Zion, not his best friend Rico, not even Miss Loretta down the block, who always brought him cornbread when she baked too much. He just sat with it, trying to swallow something that didn't want to be swallowed. He kept thinking about that woman, the quiet, trembling voice, the way she looked at him different once the rust on her heart had cleared like the rust on her bike. She had known. Somehow, she had seen him. The man, not the color. But she didn't know what happened after she left. She didn't hear the whispers. Didn't see Rick's face at the office window. Didn't watch his tools being shoved into a cardboard box like relics after a storm. Derek glanced over at them now, his tools, coated in grease and stories. Hands had fixed over 1,200 cars in that shop. Every wrench, every bolt meant something. People didn't know that. They saw a mechanic, a dirty job, a man in stained overalls who came home too tired to dream. But to Derek, it had been ministry, something close to prayer. When Angelique died, it was cars that kept him from falling apart. When the bills drowned him, it was late nights under rusted axles that gave him peace. Men spoke with engines, and engines spoke back. But now, that voice was gone. And yet, something wouldn't allow him to sit in that grief too long. His mother's voice would always rise up in him, soft but firm. Life won't ask you if you're tired, baby. It'll keep moving. But never let anyone silence your soul just because they can't see its beauty. He inhaled slowly and looked out to the street, noticing a car he didn't recognize pull into the neighborhood. It was sleek, almost out of place, dark, polished black with windows so tinted you could barely see inside. It coasted slowly, as if its driver wasn't sure about the address. Finally, it stopped right in front of his gate. Derek squinted. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a sharply dressed white man, about mid-50s, in a gray tailored shirt and expensive watch. The kind of man you'd expect to see stepping out of a boardroom or an Ivy League welcome gala. Not on this street, not in Derek's yard. Behind him, another door opened, and there she was, the old woman, the one with the bike, Evelyn. Only this time, she didn't look weak or shaky. She walked steady, dressed in a light cream blouse, her silver white hair perfect in place, her presence calm, almost regal. Derek stood slowly, unsure what to say. His heart quickened in his chest. "Mr. James?" the man asked, stepping forward with a warm smile and extending his hand. "I'm Jonathan Carter, Evelyn's son." Derek blinked. Evelyn watched him with soft eyes but said nothing, letting her son speak. "She told me what happened," Jonathan continued, "and I did some digging. I wanted to come meet you personally." For a brief moment, Derek straightened his back, his guard coming up. "Sir," he began, cautious, "I assure you I don't work for them anymore. And whatever Mrs. Evelyn needed help with, I did because I wanted to. That's all." Jonathan nodded, absorbing the words. "I know." He paused. "That's exactly why I'm here." There was a moment of silence between the three, the kind where everything hangs in the air between strangers daring to trust for the first time. Evelyn finally stepped forward. "You fixed more than just my bike that day, Derek," she said, her voice still as delicate as that morning, but now filled with purpose. "You reminded me of my late husband. He helped strangers, too. Didn't matter who they were or what they looked like. We met in 1964 during the marches." She smiled with a trace of old sorrow. "He was white. I was not. And he taught me something. Kindness is never small." She touched Derek's wrist lightly. "You reminded me of that. After I learned what happened to you, I told my son. He told me to get in the car." Jonathan stepped in again, pulling a small leather folder from under his arm and handing it to Derek. Confused, Derek opened it. Inside, blueprints, licensing forms, bank paperwork. At the very top, bold letters engraved. Derek's garage, a place where every hand matters. Derek's lips parted, eyes scanning. Before he could find a single word, Jonathan continued. "My family owns several properties downtown. One has been sitting vacant for years. We're offering to lease it to you for nothing. My mother wants to back your startup, and I'm putting in seed money to fully cover your first year. Equipment, staff, marketing, everything, with complete ownership in your name." Derek's breath caught. For a moment, time didn't exist. Evelyn still stood quietly beside him, smiling with a warmth that could melt stone. "People need to see more like you," she said. "They need to know there are men like you, and they need places built by hands that understand hardship and still choose to heal." Derek felt his knees weaken, his mouth dry. He looked down at his hands, dark skin, cracked with grease and life. Hands turned away, disrespected, dismissed. And now, hands being offered something he never dared dream. He stepped back. "I don't even know what to say." Jonathan placed a hand on his shoulder. "Say yes." The tears came without warning. Hot, humble tears that rolled down Derek's cheeks before he could hold them in. He'd held so much in for so long, grief, anger, hope, and now it poured out in the silence of a gift not asked for, not earned through resume or credit score, but gifted through one simple act of unshakable, unallowed success. Kindness. Derek sat quietly in his living room that Saturday morning, his coffee gone cold, but the mug still in his hand like a memory he wasn't ready to let go. The house was silent apart from the ticking of the wall clock, one of the few things Angelique had picked out herself before the cancer stole her laughter, her light, and her presence from the world. It was 3 days since he was fired from Thompson's auto, but to him, Time had folded into itself. He no longer measured days. He measured worry. Unpaid utility bills on the fridge, a notice from a bank whispering foreclosure, his phone overheating from ignored job search apps. He tried his best to stay composed. Grief had taught him how to hold in the storm. But even the storm has a breaking point when it doesn't stop. He glanced at his toolbox, sitting in the corner. Tools saved up over the years, each with grease still etched in the creases, each telling a story that only he and his hands understood. They weren't flashy, but they had never failed him. Unlike people, his thoughts were interrupted by the sound of tires crunching over his gravel driveway. He stood confused. It was too early for Rico to drop by. His neighbors minded their business, and mail never came this early. Curiosity got the better of him. He peeked through the faded blinds. Outside was a sleek, black Tesla parked deliberately. Not the kind you expect to see in this neighborhood, where most cars came with rusted fenders and duct tape solutions. It looked sharp against the dull backdrop of poverty he knew all too well. Derek's brows furrowed. He opened the front door, cautiously stepping onto the small concrete slab that pretended to be a porch. From the driver's side emerged a tall white man in his 50s. He was clean, sharply dressed in a silver-gray blazer over a black turtleneck. Everything about him screamed success. The kind of man who didn't ask permission. He only gave orders and signed checks. The passenger door opened next, and to Derek's disbelief, it was her, the old woman, Evelyn. She had no bicycle now, no ragged raincoat, just a warm cardigan, perfectly pinned silver hair, and a smile so gentle it made the coldness in his chest thaw for the first time in days. Before he could speak, she took a step toward him and reached out. "Derek," she said softly. He nodded, still unsure what this was. The white man extended a firm hand. "Jonathan Carter. I'm Evelyn's son." Derek hesitated before shaking it. Civil, cautious. Jonathan looked around, then back at Derek, his expression sincere. "She told me the story. Everything you did for her, what you didn't take from her, and what it cost you." Derek lowered his eyes for a moment, ashamed not of what he did, never that, but of what followed. She needed help, Derek said plainly. That's all that happened. "But that isn't all that should have happened," Evelyn added gently. "What happened to you was wrong." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and full of unsaid truth. Jonathan reached into his blazer and pulled out a brown folder, stiff and shiny, the kind of leather that cost more than a month's rent in this neighborhood. He handed it to Derek. "What's this?" Derek asked, suspicion lacing his tone. "Hope," Jonathan said simply. "Possibility." Derek opened the folder. Inside was paperwork, blueprints, some official-looking business forms. Then he saw his name, bold, typed, not scribbled. Derek James, owner and operator. And under it, an address, a central location, downtown, near the new bank, ironically across from an old cafe that refused to serve black customers until 1983. "What is this?" Evelyn stepped forward. "You gave that kindness freely. We're giving something freely in return. You didn't ask for this, and that's exactly why you deserve it." Jonathan nodded. "I'm a property developer. My mother told me about you, how kind you were when no one was looking and no one was paying. That's a man I want to invest in. We're giving you a fully renovated auto shop, your own name, your own staff, your own rules. Everything paid for. First-year operations, licensing, equipment, all covered." He said it like he was offering coffee. So matter of fact, like this kind of miracle happened every day. Derek took a step back, disbelief etched on his face. "Why?" he asked softly. "You don't know me. Why would you do this for me?" Evelyn's eyes welled slightly as she looked at him. "Years ago, my husband marched with Dr. King. He was a white soldier turned civil rights activist. He believed men shouldn't be judged by what they have, but by what they give. I lost him 40 years ago. Every day I ask myself if I'm doing enough to keep his memory alive." She looked straight into Derek's eyes. "That morning, when you fixed my bike with nothing to gain, it felt like William was standing right there, smiling." Jonathan added, "My mother's foundation has helped small businesses grow since the 90s. But this felt personal." The wind gently moved through the trees. Derek turned and looked at his house, his street, the life he had accepted for so long, built on the belief that decent men don't finish last. They just finish alone. But here he was, being given a key to a door he never even dreamed to knock on. He was speechless. His voice broke as he tried to form words. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Evelyn whispered. Please, don't let this world tell you that you don't deserve more. His vision blurred. Memories of his late wife's hospital bed, the foreclosure letters, the gasp from customers who didn't expect a black mechanic to be gentle and brilliant, the quiet battles he didn't win, but never lost his soul in. And now, here stood a woman who saw him, and a man, her son, who used his privilege as a bridge instead of a wall. Derek nodded slowly. Yeah, he said through the tears. Yeah, I say yes. In that moment, something inside him rose, something bigger than survival. Pride, purpose, ownership. He wasn't just a worker anymore. He was about to become a name on a sign. 2 months passed, and with every sunrise, the corner of 5th Street and Marshall Avenue in downtown Montgomery began to change. Quietly, humbly, but with purpose. Where once there stood an old, dust-covered gas station full of rust and regret, blue tarps, scaffolding, and paint buckets now worked in harmony to bring something new to life. Something born from ashes, from pain, but mostly from love and grace. The city didn't notice it at first. Most walked past without a second glance. Just another building under construction, they thought. But on the inside, on the tired, sacred floor of that concrete shop, something sacred was rising, piece by piece, wood by wood, brick by brick. And at the center of it all stood Derek James, sleeves rolled up, not just overseeing the work, but doing it with his own 2 hands. The same hands that once fixed broke-down cars in the back of Thompson's garage. The same hands that helped an old woman no one else saw. The same hands that were once dismissed as cheap labor were now pouring the foundation into his own legacy. There was dirt under his nails again, sweat in his eyes, but this time he smiled through it. Because every nail he hammered, every coat of paint he brushed, was for something greater than a paycheck. It was proof that maybe, just maybe, being a good man, even when nobody gave you credit, still mattered. That kindness comes back. The shop, painted a clean navy blue with sleek red trim, had a large glass front door, and up above it, written in cursive silver script, was a sign that made Derek swallow tears every time he looked up. Derek's Garage, where kindness takes you further than fuel. It wasn't just a slogan. It was a declaration of who he was, who his mama raised him to be, who Angelique would be proud of if she could see him now. Opening day drew closer, and he didn't spend it alone. Derek had made a promise to himself long before the keys were placed in his hands. He wouldn't forget where he came from, and he wouldn't open those doors unless he brought someone with him. So he brought in Terrell, 19, fresh out of probation and shadowed by poor decisions that came from a hard life, but full of raw talent when it came to engines. He brought in Miss Iris, a widow black woman in her 50s who had been doing admin assistant jobs in basements and back offices, paid half what she was worth. Now, she was the shop's front manager. And Jordan, the boy from Thompson's garage who had cast his eyes down when Derek was fired. Well, Derek forgave him because he knew what it was like to be afraid in the face of injustice. He offered him a spot, and Jordan took it without an ounce of pride, just gratitude. Derek didn't build a business. He built a home for all the ones that had been overlooked, talked over, fired for being human. And on opening day, a quiet Saturday morning, the breeze warm, the skies clear, cars line up outside the shop well before 9 a.m., as if the city already knew that something special lived there now. There were old cars, new cars, beat-up trucks held together by prayers, and even a couple bicycles. Derek greeted each customer at the door, shaking hands, remembering names, smiling wide. And then, just before noon, he heard that voice. Derek? He turned around. She was there again. Evelyn. No bike, no coat this time. Just her steady smile, her purse tucked on her arm, and her son, Jonathan, standing beside her like a ghost from a past life that had given him a mission, where other cars parked. Jonathan had walked his mother in. Two white people standing in front of a shop in a predominantly black part of the city, not with superiority, but with something rare, respect. Derek stepped toward Evelyn and hugged her gently, like she was family. And in many ways, she now was. She looked up at the shop sign and touched her chest. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." Derek smiled. "We did it." "No," she said firmly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You did. You were the one who helped when you had every reason not to. You were the one who gave, with nothing to gain. You were the one who kept believing when even the world told you to stop." She reached into her handbag and pulled out something wrapped in a soft cloth. "This," she continued, unwrapping it slowly, "was my husband's compass. He carried it during the civil rights marches in Selma. Said it helped him find his way, even when he wanted to turn back." She extended it toward Derek. "I want you to have it." Derek hesitated, took the relic slowly, turned it in his palm. It wasn't just a compass. It was symbol of legacy, of direction, of choosing the path of peace, even when the world tries to pull you toward anger and bitterness. That's exactly what Derek had done his whole life. And now the world gave back. Tears fell. He didn't wipe them. Miss Iris came out with lemonade. Taro brought out a Bluetooth speaker playing old soul music. Laughter rose. Cars honked. Neighbors waved. But through it all, Derek stood at the threshold of his shop. His home now. Tears still rolling, one hand holding the compass, the other hand open, ready to shake the next customer's hand. Because he knew now, in a world of shortcuts and cruelty, when you live with love, when you lead with kindness, especially in silence, unseen, you don't just survive, you rise. And when kindness is the fuel, there's nowhere you can't go.